web app or Create React app using the Create React app built by the team at Facebook. So we're going to do that today. We're going to go slowly, step by step, and talk about all of the different ways we build components. And we're going to build on what we learned last week, which was our JavaScript refresher. So if you haven't gotten a chance to see that or you weren't here in class last week, go watch that video. It's just a refresher on all the new concepts in next-gen JavaScript. We talk about arrow functions. We talk about some stuff like destructuring arrays, and you're going to have to know how to do those things in order to understand what we're doing today. So if those things sound confusing to you, go watch that video, come back here and watch this one. But with that out of the way, let's get this started. So some basics getting into React, some basic concepts that we're going to talk about today and words you'll hear me say all the time. And don't worry if they sound confusing now, you'll understand them at the end of today, is components, which are the main sort of building blocks for each thing on our page. So if you have like a button or like a little module that pops up on the screen and an overlay, we build a component for each little building block on our web page. Props, which is a word for arguments that we can pass into methods, and props are dynamic, so they can be passed into every component, and you'll see how they work later. I know it's a weird word, but you'll kind of understand why it's called that, and it'll make sense a little bit later on into this lesson. We'll learn about state, and we'll touch on React hooks a little bit today, but we won't learn about them too much. Obviously, then there's some more advanced concepts like effects and context that we won't cover, just because we're just getting into React and it's kind of near the end of the year. But those are some of the main concepts that we will cover today. Hopefully, you'll understand what they mean and how they work. Props is like properties. Yeah, exactly. You got it. They're the properties of an object that's passed into a component. And you can get props from an object, but you can also pass functions as a prop as well. So you don't have to just pass properties. You can also pass a function that returns something, which is kind of cool because it lets us have a lot of control over what we do. So we'll take a look at that in a little bit. We won't get ahead of ourselves here. I'm just kind of telling you the keywords to look out for. And we'll kind of get back into this. So remember, when we introduced JavaScript, it's React. React.js is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces, right? So everything we do in React, you technically can do in vanilla JavaScript, but there's a reason we use React over vanilla JavaScript. Remember, we looked at that Netflix example and how it's just one HTML page, but when you click between My List and Movies, the page doesn't actually pull a new HTML page. It just renders different items or components on the DOM or the document object model instead of making a request to the server to load a new HTML page. So we never have to wait for rendering or anything like that, which makes these web apps feel really reactive, hence the name React. They kind of model a similar reaction as you would expect on a mobile app. So yeah, we interact with the DOM, very similar to native mobile apps. This is really great. So why do we use React.js over JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, if we can do the same thing in all of them? Well, for example, remember that to-do demo that we did? And if I wanted to make a second to-do item, like here in this example in the PowerPoint, if I wanted to make a second to-do item, I would have to write all of that code all over again, making my file really long in code and confusing because I would have to define functions for the button on the second item, but with different names so that I could differentiate between which button was clicked. With React, we only have to write one component, which is a custom HTML element. Here you can see the to-do. Let me put my highlighter on. You can see we have a custom to-do component, and we'll talk about that a little bit later today about how to make it. But you can just duplicate it on a second line, and instantly you've created a new to-do component, but all of the functionality and buttons and click event listeners are duplicated, but you don't have to write separate code to be able to differentiate between which button. React handles all of that in the background. JavaScript takes way more code and has limits. So remember, with JavaScript, this is called an imperative approach, where you write every single step that needs to happen. And with React.js, it's called a declarative approach. We're working on a higher level, right? So you have React and the React library, and they take care of all of the stuff with the steps and the order that needs to happen. And we just have to declare the components we want to use and how they interact with each other. And React takes care of all the heavy lifting in the background for rendering that code. So React.js is a declarative approach. Also, remember, we kind of did a little introduction onto single page applications. So because things are easier with React.js and we can create these rich user interfaces, we often build our apps or our web apps as SPAs, SPAs, or single page applications. So like Netflix, it's just a single page / index.html, but you can go between all of these different tabs and they're just loading everything onto index. It never actually requests a new HTML page to the server. It just renders something different on the DOM. It is possible to control part of a page with React.js, but it's more common that you'll see this example on the right where all of the elements and components are controlled by React. Just to let you know that that's possible to do part, but most of the time, and what we'll teach in this class, is controlling the entire web page with React.js. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to create our very first React project. We have to set up our React.js projects a little bit differently so that we can use HTML code inside of a JavaScript file. So you may have noticed this from 2 weeks ago when I did our first introduction, that we have this app.js file, but in the code, there's actually a div and an h1, and those are HTML element tags, but it's a .js file. So how is this working if this isn't JavaScript? Well, it's kind of interesting. The language is actually a different language, and it's rendered differently by the browser. This is called JSX, okay? And because the browser can't render JSX, it has to convert all of this HTML code into JavaScript in the background so that it can render it. The browser knows how to interpret HTML and it knows how to interpret JavaScript, but there's something in the React project that we use called the build step, where it will build this code and make it recognizable and transform it so that the browser can render it. Okay, so we can't just create these HTML files manually. We use this external tool to build all of these files in the background. So you'll see all of the benefits of being able to write HTML code in a JavaScript file and using JSX. We'll talk a little bit about it later on in the lesson, but just for now, it's handy for you to know that's called JSX. Okay, so what's this tool that I'm talking about that's going to build and transform that JSX HTML code into JavaScript in the background? Well, the tool that's doing all of this magic behind the scenes is called Create React App. And we did kind of get to play around with it 2 weeks ago, but we didn't really understand how it worked and how everything kind of connected to each other throughout the project. So Create React App is a tool built by the team at Facebook, and it's really handy for creating a new single page application in React. It sets up your development environment so you're using all the latest JavaScript features, and it optimizes your app for production. So you'll need to have Node.js on your machine in order to do this. So if you don't, and you're just watching this now, please go to nodejs.org and install the latest version of Node.js. Node.js is a JavaScript runtime. It just allows you to write JavaScript code outside of the browser. We're not going to be doing any Node.js code with React, but we do need it to install the CRA or Create React App tool that we'll be using. The project generated will also use Node behind the scenes to create a server that hosts our files, and when we save any changes, it'll auto reload that server. So we do need Node.js to do that. When you download Node.js, just get the latest current download and then install all the defaults onto your machine. All right, so once you're at that step and you have Node.js installed and it's the most up-to-date version, we're going to want to locate or create the directory where we want our application to live. So if you keep all your schoolwork in a certain folder, or you want to have it on your desktop, you're going to need to either shift right click and open a window PowerShell there if you have that extension, or use command prompt and cd and use the cd command to change directories into the correct directory path. So I gave an example here. I wanted to switch from my C drive to my E drive because I have multiple hard drives on my machine. So I just did up by using .. and then I cd'd onto my E drive into my teaching Georgian and then mobile web applications week 11 folder and created a folder in there. So I'll show you which version should we have. I think, let me just check here. I will do a quick example of how you can cd change directory .. I go to the E drive. Now I cd into desktop and then cd into teaching Georgian 2021. cd into two mobile web applications, cd into week 11. All right, so I'm in week 11 now, and then you can check your Node version, I think, by doing node -- v. No. Is it node - v? So I have 16.3.0. So that's how you can check your Node version right there. Okay, so I'm now in this week 11 directory in my mobile web applications folder, and that's where we want to be. Another cool little trick that you might not have known about is you can go in here, and I'm holding the shift key on my keyboard, and then I'm going to right click, and you get this open PowerShell window here, and it will open automatically to the path that you're at, but it's a different command processor. You'll still have access to all of the system commands and libraries. It's just through PowerShell instead of CMD. Now, if I just right click, normally there's no open PowerShell. You have to hold shift and then right click, and then you get that option. Now, I'm here in my CMD anyways, so we'll leave it like that. All right. So once everyone's good to go and you have that, there's a command that we want to run, and we can find that command on the Create React App website, or right here, I'm giving it to you. It's npx create -react app name. Now don't run it yet, okay? Because we actually want to create a PWA React app. So if you run this, it'll go through. I was told I had a new major version of NPM available, so it gives me all of that and how to update to my NPM Node Package Manager of version 8. So then it resolved all those packages and installed it. But we want to create a PWA React app. So just letting you know, there's two options. You can create just a React app that's not a progressive web app without all the PWA options. Or if you do want service workers and service worker files with your manifest and everything, then you just have to do the same command with an added step. So it's npx create -react app, then whatever your app name is, so I called it my first PWA, and then --template, and then you have to get this exactly because this is a template that the React team made that you're using. It's going to pull it offline and use that template. It's a starter template or boilerplate code. CRA, which stands for Create React App, -template -PWA. So I'll type that in here now. We'll kind of follow along. I'll zoom in so you guys can see it. Okay, so we will type in npx create react app. I'm going to call this in class PWA. dash dash template. Now you can call this in-class PWA, you can call it PWA, you can call it whatever you want. Dash dash template, which signifies that we're going to pull a template from online, CRA dash template dash PWA. Now my thing kind of got stretched to a new line here, but if I expand this, then it looks like that. Okay, so once you hit enter, it'll do a bunch of things. It'll download, it'll install dependencies, it'll run a bunch of code. So I just hit enter, and you'll see it doing a bunch of thinking in the background. And if we have our folder open, it should create a folder in here. Let me know if that worked for you. For some reason, I'm not able to hit enter. npx create React app in class PWA. There we go. Oh. Npm naming restrictions. Oh, name can no longer contain capital letters. So that's why we did it with dashes the first time. So, didn't know that. In dash class dash PWA, enter. And now it should do creating a new folder. There it is, in class dash PWA right here. Okay, and then it's just going to download all the packages and dependencies and install them, and you'll see this go all the way across your screen. It'll take a couple minutes, so just be patient while we wait. It's downloading 1,600 different little JS files that are going to be helpful for us because they're going to have all these default built-in React components that we have access to now without having to build them ourselves. So just let that download. We can kind of double click in here and see what it's doing. So it's getting node modules, it's defining a package.json file. It'll create a git commit and everything. So just let that download, and I'll just kind of talk a little bit as that goes. So if it's successful, you'll get a message like this that says, you know, here's a couple commands that are helpful, and then happy hacking, and then you'll be in your file. That's what it should look like when you're done.
Ben,
okay, what you want to do? Oh,
I
sorry.
have a question. I got a thing that said need to install the following packages, create React app. So we say yes.
Yes. Yeah. So if you have a message that pops up that has like a little y/n, you just accept all the defaults. So you just hit yes and let it download. Now, for some reason, mine. Oh, there we go. Now it's starting to download. I had to
Yeah,
hit
it just
enter,
offered me
it
the
was just
yes.
waiting. Yeah. So mine was just kind of paused here, and I just had to hit enter, and now you can see these hash marks. They're kind of a rudimentary way of resembling a download bar or a progress bar. So when they get all the way, then we'll have downloaded 34,289 JavaScript files. So very cool. We'll just let that load, and then we'll kind of continue. So I'll pause the recording a little bit. Maybe that will speed up my download, and then I'll be back when it's done. Okay, so that took a couple minutes, and basically it's just downloaded all those dependencies, and you'll get a message that looks like this, happy hacking, and then it'll just be back at your root folder where you left off. So success created in class PWA, which is the folder inside of the directory we wanted. And then it's saying inside that directory you can run several commands. So once you're in that directory, we have access to running some of these commands. So let's just take a look in our actual folder here, week 11. So there's the folder that was created. And if we double click it, we can see node modules was downloaded. And here's like the hundreds, you can scroll through all of these, of modules that were downloaded that we'll have access to through React. And then the public folder inside of here is our index.html and our manifest.json and our favicon, as well as some logos. Now, the area we'll be spending most of our time today is inside the SRC folder, where there's going to be an app file, an index file, some report files, some service workers, and then obviously a gitignore and a package.json. Now, something interesting to note with package.json is in here, if I just double click and open it, we can see here's all the dependencies that we downloaded, and we can see that React is one of them right here. So React on line 9 and React DOM and React scripts. And this little arrow at the front, oh my goodness, this is really annoying. If I scroll in, that little arrow means keep updating whatever version React is of the latest of this version. So the latest major update. So it won't update when this goes to 17.0.3, and it won't update it if it goes to 17.1. But if it goes to 18, it'll download that. So it's the latest stable release. So we've got access to our React scripts. And if we come down a little further, we see here we've got a scripts object. And inside we have access to the start command, the build command, the test command, and the eject command. So we can run start, which will start our server, build, which will compile and build all of our React code into a compiled, compressed version for hosting online. And then testing and ejecting, we won't really touch or have to worry about. So that's just something to know inside of package.json. So from your command prompt, I'm just going to scroll down. Let's cd into that folder that you just created. So I'm going to cd into my in-class-pwa, and we'll see I've updated my path now here. And then you'll notice we had access to some of those commands like yarn start. We will do it with npm, which is Node Package Manager. You can do it with yarn. I'm not sure, to be honest, the differences about using yarn versus npm. If you do know, feel free to tell me. If you don't, then no worries. But we'll do npm start. And this, okay, like what we just looked at in our package.json, okay, if we come down to the start command, we see that it will run React scripts start. So if I went and found this file from React scripts version 4.0.3, there's a start command in there that will start a server in the background using Node.js, and then it will run it on our local host. So if I hit enter, I have to, there we go. If I hit enter, you can see it's running the React scripts start code. And as that's buffering, it's loading some stuff in the background with Node.js, and it's going to open up localhost port 3000 and run whatever the default template code is. Now, I had a little bit of a warning there about some deprecation stuff, things maybe not being the latest version, but it looks like everything's fine now. Yeah, that's fine. Not a big warning. And then it
I'm getting an
says
error, sorry.
you're getting an error.
Yeah, it's saying that it can't find the file. NPM is not
Y-
able to find the file.
You have to cd into your folder.
Yeah, I see it there. Like,
Okay, just 1 second. We'll see what we can figure out here. And it should look like something like this. So you'll get to your localhost 3000, and it will load or render the default React app just like that. Okay, so I'll pause that. We'll get everyone caught up to speed, and then we'll resume. Okay, so we figured out the problem, and it's just making sure that you're actually inside of the folder that you created inside of a folder. So here I'm in my week 11, and I may have a bunch of different React apps, but I have to cd into this one, and then you have to be in this directory with your src public and node modules. Otherwise, it won't recognize your npm run command or npm start command. So it's running my server here on localhost 3000, or its IP address if you want. And again, it'll look like this. So now that we have that, we'll go back to our PowerPoint. What we can do, oops, is, okay, so we cd'd in, we did npm start. This little highlighter button should be around the code there. And you need to make sure you're in this directory path. Okay, so then basically we executed a script within a Create React project, which started a development server. It opens a new tab in your browser automatically and displays the website. Looks like this. Now, in Visual Studio Code, let's open that up and go to that folder. So I'm going to open up my Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to do File. So this is my Visual Studio Code. I'm going to do File, Open Folder, and I'm going to open the folder to my in-class PWA. So I double-click it. I'm an in-class PWA here. So my node modules, my public, and my src are visible. I hit Select Folder, and it's going to load up here. And perfect. That's what we want to see. So I've got all these node modules, which are my dependencies that allow me to have access to Node.js JavaScript. my public, and then my src. So we want to delete a couple of files. We don't need all of these extra files. So let's try to clean up our project. We won't be doing any testing, so we can delete app.test.js. We don't need our logo.svg or report web vitals or setup test.js because we're not doing any testing. And then app.css we'll get rid of as well because we'll have our CSS in index.css. Okay, so let's go to Visual Studio Code, and you can highlight multiple files while holding Control. And I'm going to do this one, logo.svg, report web vitals, and setup test. So it should be 2, 3, 4, 5 files. You can right click and delete and remove to the recycle bin. So now you should be left with app.js, index.css, index.js, serviceworker.js, and serviceworker registration.js. Very good. Okay. Now that we've
Sorry,
deleted some files.
can you repeat which ones to delete again? I was just highlighting one.
App.css,
Yep.
app.test.js,
Mm-hmm.
logo.svg, reportwebvitals.js, and setuptest.js.
Okay, thank you.
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 files. Okay, so now that we've deleted some files, we've deleted the report web vitals, we need to remove any references to those files from the files that we still are keeping in our project. So inside of Visual Studio Code now, with these files that are left, let's go into index.js and remove a couple of lines of code we don't need anymore. So we already deleted the report web vitals, so we can delete that line 6. We can also delete this strict mode because we won't be wanting to use this. It makes it a little bit harder having to follow syntax. So I'm just going to make this a little bit more readable and put it all in one line. All right. We want to change service worker registration.unregister into register. Okay, we did that last time we were working with Create React App. And because we already deleted report web vitals, we don't need to call this function here. So we can delete lines 15, 16, 17, and 18. Okay. So that's what your final index.js file should look like here. And if you need to, it's in the PowerPoint on the next slide. If I just go here, it should look like this after you're done with it. So I've got my .register. I put this all in one line. You don't have to put it in one line. I just prefer to because it looks a little cleaner. And then I got rid of the one import statement to web app vitals. Okay. We also removed strict mode so that it won't give us as many errors with how we're doing our code. Okay. Moving on to the next file, we want to go to index.css and delete all of the code in there so that we can create our own styling from scratch. So we'll go into index.css, and I'm just going to highlight all of this and delete it so there's nothing in there. So index.css will be empty, and we're going to add new code later. So I'll just save that. And if we go to our React app here and refresh it, we'll see that it's going to start looking a little bit different, but we're not done yet. There's a couple things still. The next file we want to do is app.js, okay? And we want to remove any references that we deleted already. So remember, we deleted logo, and we also deleted app.css. So we're going to get rid of all of these lines of code, and it will look like this after. So if you're confused or if I went too fast, there's a picture here of what the code should look like. Yeah, what's your question?
When you were deleting from index.js, did you get a compilation error for the localhost? Because as you were deleting, I got the error, and then the localhost stopped displaying anything.
Index.js?
Yes, because I think as you were deleting the files, sorry, from the hierarchy, I started getting the error. I think some references created that error.
So you want to make sure you still have the React and React DOM, as well as index.css and app, and the import all from service worker registration. We're just deleting the one from web report vitals.
Yeah. Okay, somehow I got a fail to compile error in between.
You need to make sure you keep this comma in between these two arguments.
Yeah, done that. I'm just getting no such file open logo.svg. I think there's
Yeah,
a
so
reference to logo.
we're still doing that. So don't worry about if you have errors. We're still
I
working on.
see.
So app.js, we need to get rid of the logo.svg.
Okay, we are not
Okay.
done that yet.
No,
Okay.
yeah. So we're doing that right now. Yeah. So just hold tight with me, guys. If you're getting errors, don't worry about them yet because we're still working on that. Yeah, I see you're also having the same thing in chat. So just hold on till we've done all of this stuff. We're just kind of cleaning up our project so we have a really bare bones template to start from.
And can
Okay.
you show the
So
index.css again? Sorry, I missed
it's just
that.
empty.
Just empty. Okay.
Index.css is empty.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. So in app.js, we're going to delete these two lines of code, lines 2 and 3. You delete that. Okay. And then we're also going to delete any stuff in here except for, what do I want to return? We're going to delete everything inside of the return. Okay. So my return function will be empty. And then I'm going to type my own thing. I want to return a div. So I'm going to write a div. And inside the div, I'm just going to write hello like that. Okay. And then we're just exporting default app. So this is what your app.js should look like. Okay. Okay, cool. Now, if you wanted to save this or copy all of this code somewhere, all right, this is just for your own reference. I'm just going to say this. You could delete this node modules folder because these are all the dependencies and they're loaded from right here. So there's a list of dependencies in package.json. So if you ever delete this folder, node modules, all you have to do is go cd into the folder and type npm install, and it will download all of them again. So Node can get really bogged down with a lot of little files and stuff inside of Node modules. So what a lot of people do when they're working with React apps on GitHub, you'll see is that they'll remove the Node modules folder, but you still have the reference to all of them here in package.json, like this React module or React DOM module. And then they just give the instructions when you download the code from GitHub that you have to just run npm install, and then it will just download all of the node modules again, and you'll have the full app running. Okay, so our index.css should be empty. App.js should look like this with 5 lines of code, and index.js will look like this. Okay.
Could you
Okay.
please show your index.js again, please?
We're here. So there's screenshots of everything inside of the PowerPoint as well. Okay. So there's my index.js. Okay, so just to explain, so you guys understand how React works. Index.js is our starting file. So this is the first code that's run and executed in the browser when we run our app. So in this file, we're importing a couple of things. We're importing React, okay, from React. So that's the React library. And we're also importing React DOM, which is another library from React DOM. These are developed by the React team, but we have to import them to get access to those libraries. On the object React, okay, right here, we can call, so this React DOM object, okay, we can call a method called .render. And this .render method is what shows code in the browser. So in this method, the .render, we're passing this argument, and this argument. We're passing two arguments. So we're passing an HTML code, but this HTML code is in JavaScript syntax. Remember, I was talking about JSX earlier. JSX, you can kind of think like HTML within JavaScript. So we're passing it some JSX code, and then we're passing it an element called root. And what this is saying is it's saying, I want to replace this element, root, with all of the code rendered by this JSX code. And this root element we can find on our index.html inside the public folder. So if I go here and I'm in my main project directory, okay, inside the src is my index.js. So that's this file we're looking at right now. And I'm saying I want to load all of the code from app.js and replace it in, we did document get element by ID root. So if I go into my public and I open index.html, well, let's look here. We've got a single div inside my body tag. So this is my home page. And that div has an ID of root. So what's going to happen is it's going to replace whatever this div, which is just an empty div, and it's going to replace it with whatever code I'm passing to it in this argument in app. Okay? So that's how that's working. It's helpful. JSX, so just to talk a little bit more about JSX here, is a special syntax. So it's not understood by the browser. So it's converted in the background, but it's easier for us to write as a developer. So it's really helpful for writing custom HTML elements and passing them to the browser in JSX. And on import, we can, another note here, you'll notice this doesn't say from react.js. If it's a JavaScript file, we can omit the .js extension. You can just say from React, okay? So here the app element, this is a custom app element that we've created, is going to be imported from the app file. So this is app.js, but we've just omitted the .js extension. And then the second argument is the second argument is going to be passed through this render method, and it's going to be saying where the first element app should be actually rendered in the real DOM. So that element ID with root. So we found this in index.html, and this is because it's a single page application. It's a SPA, an SPA. React will then take over and control what's visible on the screen through the app element. So in index.html, we have that div with ID of root, and that's where we're grabbing, that's what we're grabbing as our second argument here to the render method. So basically, we're just telling React, render what we want to render, the custom HTML we have here, inside of index.html at the root tag. So we're just putting this here. That's how index.js is working. Okay, we know that service worker registration.register is registering our service worker, so we don't have to worry about that code either, and we have to do an import so that we can access that .register method. So index.js, that's the first code that runs. So let's take a little look at this here. We can see if you go onto your web page here, trying to load it. So now I've compiled my code. This is the code that has the deleted index.css. We removed the lines from app.js and all the cleanup we did. It should look something like this. It'll just say hello up in the top corner. But if we F12 and go into the, if I right click on this and do inspect element, look at this. This is kind of interesting. There's my hello text right here, and it's in a div. And then that div is inside another div with the ID of root. See that? And that ID of root is that root tag I showed you from index.html. So here we can see that root is coming from here, and hello is coming from, well, you guessed it. If we go back to our PowerPoint, or not our PowerPoint, if we go back to our Visual Studio Code, that hello text is coming from here, which is our app.js. So basically we're saying take whatever code is returned from app.js, so a div that says hello, and place it inside of, so here's our app, right? That app is going to return this div hello, and place it into this get element by ID of root. So it's going to take whatever this code is, div hello, and it's going to place it up in public index.html inside of this div. So that's why you have a div inside of a div. Now, if I go into app.js and I change this to a, if I change this to a p tag or an h1 maybe, just for example, and I save this, okay, and I reload it, now it's an h1. When I inspect it, I still have my div ID of root, and then inside of it is my h1, right? Because I just added the h1 tag to my app.js, which is getting passed into my index.html root here through my index.js render function. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, yeah, that's what else I was going to talk about. So this, if you think about this, the app, this is a component, okay? And all a component is a function. So we have function, app, and it returns something, and then we export that function. So all it is a function, and it returns some JSX code, because this is a .js file, but there's some HTML in it, which means this is that HTML inside of JavaScript code. So it's just a regular function, okay, which is super important because in app.js, this is basically your first example of what a React component is. All it's comprised of is just a function. Okay, so that's a React component right there. Function app, and then you return some code to be rendered inside of the browser. All right, we can use this component like an HTML element, like we have used elements in index.html, but it's not recognized by the browser until it's converted, right? So here's our custom component we're calling app, and we have a little angle bracket around it like it's a div tag almost, except it's a custom component. So it's coming from app.js, and app.js exports this function, and this function returns an h1 tag. So that's how that code is being passed around. Okay, a component in React must be something that returns something that can be rendered in the browser. So if we look at this and it returns an h1, well, that can be rendered in the browser, so that's okay. All right, when we go to my browser and we're inspecting the element, you'll notice we don't see anything that says app.js or app component or anything like that. This is because these custom elements that we create are not known by the browser. We just use them in our application in React, and then the browser returns the HTML content that's returned by the JavaScript function inside of it. Okay, so like I said, the browser doesn't know JSX code, so you won't see any reference to the word app or app.js. But when it converts this in the background, then we see what's returned from the function, which is an h1. Hopefully that makes sense, and that's an intro to your first component in React. Okay, so let's get a little bit more detailed here. Let's start building an actual app. And I gave you that example to download 2 weeks ago with the to-do app. And we're going to build it from scratch this time so we can actually understand how it works. So we're going to do a title with an h1 and an h2, as well as a button. Okay, so inside of our app.js, let's add a couple of different things that we can return. So first of all, I'm going to hit enter, a few times so that I can write my JSX code inside of the return statement. Okay, so I'll put everything inside of a div, and then I'm going to have an H1 with the list or the word to-dos or my to-dos, my to-do list. Okay. Under my H1, I'll create another div, and inside of that, I'm going to create a title called title. Okay. After title, I'm going to create another div, and inside of that div, I'm going to create a button. Inside of the button, I'm going to call the button delete, and then we'll end each of the 3 divs. Okay, so it should look like this. I'll pause here for a second so you can copy the code. And as I pause, I'll just mention something about formatting and using our extension Prettier that I had you install a few weeks ago. So for me, if I want to look at how to run my formatting extension, we can go into File, Preferences, and Keyboard Shortcuts. And all you have to search is Format, okay? And then you'll see Format Document. I have to press Shift, Alt, and F. Okay, so if I go back to my app.js, and you'll notice this looks a little messy, and not everything is perfectly indented or tabbed in. If I press Shift Alt F, look at it indents and moves some of the code around. Now you'll notice if I make this really messy and I tab some stuff all over, even if I'm missing a semicolon right here at the end of my return statement, and I do Shift Alt F, it puts it all back. There's the semicolon. It tabbed everything back out. It did leave one space here. If I do Shift Alt F again, it doesn't really care, but we can get rid of that. Okay, so that is how you use the Prettier formatting tool, which can be really helpful in order to know which divs belong to which divs. Okay, so let's take a look at what our project looks like right now. So we have our title, our H2, and our button, and nothing's really happening at the moment, but we wouldn't really expect it to because this is all we're passing. So kind of the way you can think of React right now, or a React component, is everything inside of this return statement is the HTML code that will be rendered on the screen. Okay? So the next thing we want to do is apply a little bit of styling so that it actually starts to look like the to-do app that we made last couple weeks ago. We're going to take a 10-minute break though, so if you want to get caught up or if you're having any console errors, we can figure those out. I'm going to pause the recording for now, and we'll come back in about 10. Okay, welcome back. So we just also figured out if you're using Node 17, you got to run this export node options legacy provider line of code, or else you'll get some weird envelope error, error 03.08, envelope routines unsupported. Basically, if you get any error, try Googling it first, see what comes up. Usually Stack Overflow has some really good support. And then if you can't figure it out, then you can start asking around, email me. But generally try to Google it first and see if you can solve it and come up with, because chances are someone's experienced that error before. And then that saves a lot of emails for me, because that's all I do. If I ever get an error from you guys and I don't understand it, you just Google it and you just start doing some research to see what's causing your error. But moving on, our app should look like this. You just have a default H1, H2, and a button, and nothing is interactive right now. Okay, and that's where we are. Okay, so moving forward, talking about HTML and now CSS, we want to do some styling. Okay, now this is kind of important for you to get this concept. Now I get that you're looking at these images and it's maybe a little bit confusing. So let me just explain what I'm going to talk about here. Typically,
Sorry,
when
did I
we
miss
would-
anything? I just got back.
Nope, we just started.
Okay.
Okay, so typically we're just talking about CSS and adding CSS to elements in React. So in React, just open my chat here. Okay, so typically with HTML, we would use the class keyword, right? And then in your CSS, you would use whatever class you created. So in this instance, card, and then you would apply your selectors and your element properties to affect that with CSS. We cannot use the class keyword, okay, here because this is in a JavaScript file, okay? We are in, what is this, app.js. You can't use the class keyword because it's a keyword used by JavaScript already, and there's going to be some, you know, interference because you're using a keyword and it's not what it means. So in vanilla JavaScript, we can't use that keyword. So if we actually look here, up in the right, this is vanilla JavaScript version of the to-do list app that we're building. Okay, because I gave you guys both examples already. We can see that the default keyword descriptor to add a class for CSS to an object or to an HTML element is class name. So we don't use the class keyword, we use class name if we want to create HTML classes for CSS. So because it's actually in a JavaScript file and it's not HTML and this is JSX code, we have to use the same naming conventions as vanilla JavaScript. This is one of those rare cases where the attribute name differs from the property name. But here we're going to be using the property name, which is class name, okay? Not what we write in standard HTML, which would be class. In most cases, you can just use standard HTML code, right? Like button and div and h2. But instead of using class, you use class name, okay? Just an important note for you. So in our app.js, let's go to our code and let's add a class, okay? So in our div here, by underneath the my to-dos, okay, I'm going to do class name equals, and then we'll call this CSS card. Okay, so that's a class for card. Okay, so I just added class name equals card. Now I can do the formatting, Shift Alt F, obviously it's fine. There's nothing there. And let's look at the CSS we have to add. Okay, so here's our index.css. We're adding a background color of white, a radius of 4, a box shadow of 1 pixel and 4 pixels, a padding, and some width, okay? And that's going to give us a little card look. So inside of index.css, that's that empty file, let's do .card to access the class, and then we'll type background color white, border radius 4 pixels, box shadow, we'll do 0, 1 pixel, 4 pixels, and then the RGBA value, whoops, is going to be 0, 0, 0, 0.2. So just be slightly darker, a darker black kind of thing right down here. Okay, and then we're going to add some padding so it looks like it actually has some room on the side. And same with some width so that it's a default width. Okay, so that will be the CSS code for our card class. So just pause the video here if you want to be able to write that out. And if we load it up in our browser, we can see there's our little box shadow. There's our round border radius. And here's our width of 20 rem. So there's our card. Looking pretty good. Okay, so again, there's the code. Now I know the thumbs up aren't working in chat, but just send me a thing when you guys are done with that. Good question. Do we need to use double quotes or single quotes or both? So in app.js, you'll notice I use double quotes around my class name. If I delete that and I use a single quote, okay, which is what I am typically used to, if I do my Shift Alt F command for formatting with the prettier extension, Shift Alt F, look at it changed them to double quotes. Okay, so you can use single quotes and it will work and it's fine, but when you format it, it goes to double quotes. All right, I think that's just the way that prettier is defaulted to, and it both work. So whatever's easier for you, but if this is the way that it's formatting it, I'm sure it's doing that for a reason. Okay, so there's our index.css code. All right, we're gonna add another class. Okay, so come back to our PowerPoint. All of this code here is in the PowerPoint, so if you're following along right now and I'm switching screens too much, just open up the PowerPoint to slide 25. So we're gonna add another class name to this div around the button, and we're gonna call it actions. And then the only CSS code we're gonna put on the actions class is text align right, okay? So let's do that now. So I'm gonna go into my app.js, add a class name on the div on line 9, class name equals, I called it actions. Okay, we save that, and then in our index.css, we'll make a new class .actions and text align right. Now let's take a look at what that did to our code here. You can see now the button is on the right hand side. It moved it from here to here. So from here to here. Right? It's on the right hand side of the card. Cool. So that was the class name of actions. Now we're going to put some classes on our button. So going back to the PowerPoint, we're going to add a BTN class on button. And then these are the selectors and property values for the BTN CSS code. And then we're going to have some alternate CSS code for the BTN class. When the mouse hovers over it, we'll change the background color just slightly. And then when it's using the alt class, so when you're clicking down on it, we'll also make it a different color. So versus hover versus click versus its normal color. All right, and then alt hover as well. Okay, so let's do that. Go to our code, add the class name of BTN. Okay, and then inside of index.css, we'll add a couple of classes here. The first one is the BTN class. BTN, and inside of BTN, we're going to do font, inherit, padding, 0.5 rem, 1.5 rem. The cursor will be a pointer, so that I'll change it to the hand. The border radius, oops, will be 4 pixels. The background color will be hashtag 800040. The color of the text will be white. And border, 1 pixel solid of the same color, 80040. And I'll give it some margin of 0.1 rem. Semicolon. Good. So that's our BTN class. Can't open the PowerPoint. The Office app was on your iMac, which is not working. Is it open online? Probably not. On Blackboard, there should be the option to open up whatever I've posted in a separate format, I believe. I think you can hit this little accessibility thing. Oh no, there it is. If you go into weekly learning week 10 where the PowerPoint is and you can't open it, I think if you click this little A, alternative formats, you click that and you're able to download it as a PDF, as an HTML document, as an audio file, etc. All right, so let's add the rest of these BTN classes. So we have BTN hover. BTN hover. So when we hover over it, we're going to make the background color a little bit different. We're going to do hashtag 9C1458. No. Yeah, there we go. It's like a red. And the border color will also change to 9C4518. Okay, so just quick little ones here on BTN -- alt. Background color transparent. Color, do that 800401 again. And the last class, BTN -- alt hover. So when it's the alt button and you're hovering. Background color, hashtag F8DAE9. All right.
Ben, what does the -- alt stand for?
That is a great question. I thought I knew, and I'm going to Google it for you right now. -- alt. I'm assuming it's just an alternative text. Okay, alternative text for an area. If the image cannot be displayed, then the alternative attribute produces the alternative information for an image. But I want to see what it does on the button. It's for an input type button. So I think it just outputs a title as alternative text. And so it'll put alternative text as this color, and then when you hover over it, it'll change colors if the button doesn't load for some. Make sense? So you don't have to have these, but probably good practice. Cool. Oh, the thumbs up's working now. Huh. That fixed? Okay, cool. And a couple more classes we want to add here. So this little star will impact all elements. So box sizing, border box, that just changes some sizing. You'll see when we do it. Actually, we'll do each of these individually. So if I go to my page right now, we'll see it looks like this. So I've got my delete button. It's that nice red color. Now if I turn off my mouse hover and I hover over, you see how the cursor changes to a finger and the color of the button changes. And then when I click it, oh, it doesn't actually change color. I thought it would. Let's add these classes now. So one at a time we'll do it, and we'll refresh the page and we'll see the impact that it has so you guys can kind of understand. So this is going to impact all elements on the page. Box sizing, and we're going to do border box. Okay, and okay, let's load this up here. I'm going to see if I can do this and save, and pay attention here on my right hand side. See, it just shrunk this a little bit. So it just changed the sizing of each element. Okay, now our body, we're going to impact all of the elements on the body. We're going to make the font family sans serif. Okay, so that's just a nice font. We're going to give some margin of 3 rem, and the background color will make a slight off-white with hashtag df. Now if I save this, pay attention on the right hand side, it refreshes, there we go. So we just gave some margin, we changed the font family, and now it's a gray background. And one last class here, we want to impact our H1 and our H2 with the same code. And we're just going to change the color of them. Instead of being full-on black, we'll do 333, and it'll be just an off gray. And there we go. Hardly noticeable, but looks better. Already kind of looking what we worked with last week. Okay, so far, should look like this. You have these three classes, card, actions, and button, and your code should be looking like this on the right-hand side. Okay, our first component is taking shape. At the moment, all we have in the code is one component. There's a few reasons we may want to split these up, right? So right now, all we have is the H1, the divs, the H2, the divs, and the button. We're going to want to split these up and make our component a bit more flexible, and you'll see why, but basically it allows you to have multi-purpose. So I can make a component for just my button, or I can make a component for just my card and just my title. And that way, if I ever need to reuse a button later on in my code, I don't have to recreate everything. We want to try to keep our JSX files or our React components very modular and manageable, okay? We don't want them to be super long and giant like one full web page, because then it's not very you won't have the ability to reuse code if you made a new page and you wanted to add some buttons or blog posts or something like that. So think of each individual item like being its own component, and we want to split them up so that they can interact with each other, but they're not all just one block, because then they're kind of glued or grouped together permanently if you make them like this. All right, so we'll work on splitting them up a little bit. Now let's say I wanted to make a change, or let's say I wanted to have two of these to-do lists, right? So if I wanted to have two of these to-do lists, what I would have to do in my code is I'd have to go to, I'll close this and this. In my app.js, I would have to take my div class name card all the way down to here, and then I would have to copy it and paste it and save, and then I would get, let's load it, there we go, I would get two of these. But if I wanted to make a change, let's say I wanted to add, you know, like another div or like a second button, I would have to add the button here. I would have to add, let's say I wanted to add a span. I would have to add the span here on line 11, but I'd also have to add the span here on line 19. So you'd have to change it in multiple places. That's not a very good way to program, okay, because then you're changing things in multiple places. And the whole point of React is that we only build it in one spot and we reuse it. So I'll delete all of this, and we'll talk about how we can edit this all in one place while being able to make two of them, okay? So that's kind of what this slide is talking about here. If I wanted to put a span in one of my cards, but I wanted two cards, I would have to change it in two places. If we wanted two buttons, we'd have to change everything in all of the buttons. It's not very friendly for a developer. So React embraces this concept of components, which is like building our own building blocks. So we're going to create a new file to be able to do some of this. And that new file is going to be todo.js. We're going to put todo.js inside of a components folder. This is a typical convention in React, and you put all of your custom components in there except for app.js. Make sure the extension is .js. Another really important point is that when you create the to-do, you have to use a capital character on the first name. The way React wants to use custom components and the way it differentiates between default or built-in HTML elements like div and h1 versus our custom elements like to-do or app is the fact that they have a capital letter for their first letter. So remember, we need to do to-do with a capital T, because then React knows this is a custom element for HTML that the user has defined, right? Also remember, when we create a component, we're creating a new component here, it's just a function that returns some HTML code. So let's do that in our code right now. Okay, so here I am. I'm going to format it so it's nice and neat again. And then I'm going to right click on my src file and do a new folder and call it components. Inside of my components folder, I'm going to create a new file and do capital T todo.js. Now I have an empty file in todo.js, but remember, a component is just a function that returns some HTML code. So here's my function. And here I export it as a default. Okay, so that's what we have inside of todo.js. Now, we want to move everything from our card inside of the app.js into our todo.js so that our app.js will look like this here, and our todo.js will now contain the HTML elements for the card class. So we're going to cut this code, lines 7 to 12, from from app.js into to-do.js. Then we will need to call the to-do component from the app component, which you'll see in the next screen as a custom app component that we've created from the user's perspective. So let's do that right now. So here in app.js, I'm going to grab lines 7 to 12 and do Control X so that I just have my h1 inside of a div. I'll save that, and then in my to-do.js, we're just going to write a return function inside of this code, because that's all it has to do is return a renderable element, and it will look just like that. I'll do Shift Alt F and it will format it for me. And there we go. We have our div with a card, our title, and our class name of actions, and a button of delete. Okay. So now we go to our website. You'll notice it's gone, and that's because I've created a to-do custom React component, but I haven't called it in my app.js. So my app.js is only saying, hey, I want to show an h1. And if we look at our code, that's all we're getting is an h1. The way we call our custom elements or React components is by the same way we call any HTML element or component. Just like how we call div with these angle brackets, we call our to-do component, although it just has a capital letter this time. All right. So now that we've cut that div ID card into our to-do.js function and we've created a component, we just have to call that to-do component from the app.js file. Okay. This custom element, when we use it here in JSX code here, has to start with a capital letter. If you do it with a lowercase, it won't be valid. React internally differentiates between built-in HTML elements like divs and h1 tags, and then our custom elements by the casing. Okay, so lowercase here, uppercase here. It has to start with the uppercase letter. Okay, so let's go like this. To do. Now, we can't call it because we haven't imported it. So we have to import it into our file. So import to do from /components/to do. Now you can type to-do.js, but because it's a JS file, we can also omit that. Now this to do is referencing the to do from our to-do.js, and it will return this code in this block. So if we go to our browser, there we can see we've got our card back with our button. Now, what if we want 2 or 3 to-dos? Well, I can make a little break, and then I can just copy my to-do like so, save it, and look at that. Super easy. I don't have to duplicate any code. It's all here in one place. And now, if I want to add a second button, I just have to type it in one spot, and I've got a button on all 3 of my to-do components, which saves me so much time as a developer because I don't have to change it in every single area like I was showing you before with the span example. So that's how we can do that.
Question.
Yes.
So if you want to have different things written on the buttons themselves or different titles, how do you do that? How do you differentiate between which one?
That is a great question. You just made my day because that is literally the next slide right here. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll get right into that. And that's where we're going to talk about props. Okay. So what a lovely transition. So just to finish up on this concept here, we can duplicate our to-do components very easily by calling the to-do custom HTML element that we created. and we'll see the updates that we make to it across the app all at once, just like I added a button on each one. So if we wanted to update the title or make it custom text, we can't do that because it would update it everywhere. Like Michelle just said, if I wanted to make my, I'll get rid of this button that I created. If I wanted to change this text to say, go grocery shopping, okay? Well, now all of my to-do lists are going to say go grocery shopping. It updates it across the entire app. So instead, we want to let the place where we use to do pass in different data into these separate components. Just like we pass arguments into functions when we call them, we can, and they'll show different data on each instance depending on the data that we're passing in. We can do that with components as well. We can pass it information to show. Okay, so we have to go to where we use the to-do list, and we can pass something called a prop or a property into the custom component. So here I created a property called text, and I filled it with this data of learn React, and I pass it into my function to do, and it accepts props. Now props automatically will store whatever information is in here, and then I can access the object, the JSON object properties, by doing dot and then whatever the property name is. So this is kind of a concept that we know from the HTML world combined with a concept that we know from functions. It's how we pass data where we want the component to be changed, but now we just have to pass the code to accept these values where they're being passed into. So let's do this step by step, shall we? So inside of app.js, let's create a property called text, and on each to-do, we'll create a different item on our to-do list. So the first one might be go grocery shopping. Okay, the second one might be, oops, eat ice cream. And the third one might be finish React assignment. Okay, now we're passing this data in, but if I go to my website, it still says get grocery shopping. Well, that's because on my to-do.js, that's the title here. It's not dynamically accepting it. So I'm passing it in from app.js into my to-do.js component. But in my to-do.js component, I have to accept the properties by typing props up here. And then instead of typing going grocery shopping, we're going to use something called a dynamic statement. Now, this is a syntax of JSX, okay? Now, let me talk about props a little bit before we get into this. These are called properties because we accept a parameter called props in our to-do function, okay? And we can accept this parameter in every function. So it doesn't have to just be to-do. If we have another component later on, we can also accept props in it there. Because the React concept is called props, props will be a JavaScript object where all of the attributes added on the HTML elements right here, like text, okay, are going to be key value pairs in the props object when we accept them into to-do.js. So here's your key, and here's your value. So the key is text, and the value is eat ice cream. Here, the key is text, and the value is finish React assignment. Okay? In standard JSON or JavaScript, we access objects with the, blank dot blank method. If we do this, we'll just see props dot text. Okay? So if I do this, if we do props.text, okay, and that's using the blank.blank method, that's how you access an object. If we do this and run it in our browser, we just see props.text. The reason for this is because everything rendered inside of the return statement is actually rendered as a JavaScript expression, okay? So that's because it's JSX code. So we have to put it inside of curly braces in order for it to run JavaScript in here. So if I do curly braces and I do something like 2 plus 2, that will actually be treated as a JavaScript expression that will be evaluated. And here we can see it outputs 4. Okay? It'll treat it as JavaScript and output the expression of 4, and you can only do single lines of code in here. We can't do blocks of code like if statements, but if we wanted to return props.text and access the properties of that object, we could just type in props.text inside of these curly braces. Okay, so those are key to include. So now if we save this, we can dynamically get the text that's passed into each item from the app.js, and we can see each one is different. So hopefully that answered your question. Perfect. So here we go. There's an example of what it will look like. And here's the example of doing the 2 plus 2 and evaluating to 4, as long as it's inside of those curly braces. Okay, so this props concept is how we can build super custom reusable components, and it's a major first step for us in React and learning React. Now we need to know how to handle events on the delete button with an on-click handler. Now let me just check the time here. It's 1:51. Might take a little break and then keep going, but we do have, let me think here. I think this would be a good spot to stop and continue next week because I don't want to go too crazy with it. I would like you guys to get caught up to this point, which is slide 37, if you're going to follow the PowerPoint or the videos, and get your code working to this point where you can pass different props into the to-do list. And it will be a PWA. You just won't see the download button because it's on a development environment, not a production environment. And we'll deal with that next week as well. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next week, and you can kind of look into it. It would be awesome if you worked ahead a little bit just to kind of get your brain working with some of these concepts. We're going to talk about using event handlers. So the old way of doing it was doing getting the document.query selector button and then doing add event listener. That's the old JavaScript way. The new way of what we'll do is we'll create an actual function called delete handler, and then we can pass that function on or call that function on an HTML element. So each div or H2 element in JSX code is actually a React component under the hood. These are just made by the React team, and they look and act like regular HTML elements. This is important because we can add on-click attributes on any element, and the casing doesn't matter, okay? We don't execute the function with delete handler here because it will evaluate the code right away before the button is clicked. So we just want to point to the function using its name if the button is clicked, all right? This will tell React that the function will be executed if this element is clicked. If we just call it right away, then it'll just make the button clicked right away. So we write a nested function inside of this to-do function before the return statement. This is normal React convention, and we'll write normal JavaScript code up here, and then JSX code after the return. So here we have normal JavaScript, and here we have JSX, which is the renderable output that will go to the browser. Using props.text as the argument if we want, and then we can console.log those properties to the console. So we'll just do this really quick and kind of get you guys prepared for next week. I don't think we'll be able to finish everything that I have planned for today, but we'll get some stuff working with the buttons. So let's write a little JavaScript event handler here in the todo.js file. So I'm going to create a couple new lines before my return statement, and I'm going to do function delete handler. Okay. And in here, we can just do console.log clicked. Okay. Now we're not actually calling it. You can see it's slightly grayed out. The way we call it here is if the button is clicked, we add an onClick attribute, and we call the delete handler function. So now if I run my code and I open up a console window, okay, and I click a button, keep an eye down here, we should see console.log clicked. And there it is. If I click this button, it also works. So that's the really cool thing about components. I only had to add this function in one place on my to-do component. And because all my to-do components have a button, when I add this function in this one spot, even though it's duplicated 3 times here, automatically it knows to attribute this button to that function, this button to that function, and this button to that function. And I didn't have to do any of that code in the background under the hood to connect those buttons to those functions. That is the power of React right there. Now, if we want to be able to custom print text, then we can just do console.log and instead type props.text. Now we can get the actual element that's being clicked. So if I refresh this and clear my console, we can see eat ice cream, go grocery shopping, finish React assignment. So each button has its own function call, and each button handles its own click automatically. All right, which is so helpful for us as a developer, because doing that in vanilla JavaScript, you'd have to write each function for each button multiple times, and it would get really, really confusing. Very cool. I think we'll call it for here. So try to get this far, and if you want to, try working in the next couple of slides where we create modal.js and backdrop.js. These are 2 components that we'll make next week, and they're going to have their own functions and props that we pass to them to be able to actually call and open a little overlay or a modal in front when the user clicks this delete button instead of just printing to the console. So I'll post these recordings so you can follow along or use the PowerPoints. They're very detailed, and if you look in the notes section on the PowerPoint, everything is explained on what to do. So I'll end this recording here. If you have questions, email me. So thank you for watching this video.